Hey, welcome to the BBA today. I think that's episode number 95. It is. The BBA today is a podcast where we talk about the goings on in and around the Brewster Baseball Association every day that we have a podcast, anyway. My name is Ron Collins. I am the general manager of the Bikini Krill. And again, we have Kurt Imber with me. Kurt is the general manager of the San Fernando Bears. How are you doing this Easter Sunday, Mr. Ember?
I'm prepared for the possibility of this being on video this time. I just got out of the makeup chair, so I apologize to the folks who had to look at me last week. But I'm doing good, Ron. Went out to brunch today. Had a drink. Almost took a nap, but
Oh
I'm gonna
man,
play through the pain here.
you are
And
ahead of the game.
excited.
Both a makeup chair and a drink before the podcast.
I'm
Uh,
loose. I'm ready.
this could be dangerous, folks. Well, in and around the BBA, it is not Easter time. It is actually late October, and we are breathlessly anticipating the final sim of the year where we see the Charlotte Flyers taking on the massive overdog in the Nashville Bluebirds. Although I haven't actually checked the local BBA poll. It was running about 50-50 because I think people were voting with their hearts rather than sabermetric brains. But I totally get that. What are your thoughts on this upcoming tilt between the Flyers, the challenger Flyers, and the champion Bluebirds? Who do you got?
Definitely pulling for Charlotte. Normally, I would want to pull for my home league, the Frick, but Nashville is full on evil empire at this point, and honestly, it's kind of fun to have an evil empire that we all can unite in our angst towards.
Well,
But it's
yeah, I think Chad
yeah,
enjoys enjoys
uh,
being Palpatine.
he's a Yankees fan, isn't he? So
He
like
is a Yankees fan. I mean, it's all the way to
comes
the
with it.
bone, man.
Uh-huh. Yeah, we've got a repeat of the 2060 series. I'm going off memory here, but I want to say Charlotte was like a wild card that year, maybe like the last team to get into the
Hmm.
playoffs, and they were a huge underdog.
That
This
sounds
time
familiar.
around, I think they have like the best offense in the league, so that always gives a team a fighting chance. The thing is Nashville's offense is like maybe a fraction of a percent behind them, but then they have the best pitching in the league, so they're a more well-rounded team. But it doesn't feel impossible like it did 2 years ago. I could see Charlotte winning.
Yeah, Charlotte, as you said, Charlotte has the offense, so they have the puncher's chance no matter what. And anything can happen in a relatively short series if they can manage to jump out early. That would probably help as far as the probabilities go. Stating the obvious, if you can win the first 2 or 3 games of the series, you got a much better chance. Hey, did you notice the big call up for Nashville? Have you Lucas McNeil Jr. made his debut
Oh, I
with
missed that.
the Nashville Bluebirds during the postseason. He was on the 40 man, so they called him up and they have used him as a defensive replacement, which I thought was gutsy. You know,
Who's he replacing?
that's a good question. I think he's played second base, so I think he's been replacing Ramos.
Okay, yeah, because their former second baseman, I'm blanking on his name, who's slid over to first base,
Yeah, that's Colby
Triska.
Triska.
That would make sense to sit Triska for sure, but
Hmm.
Ramos is a pretty good defender in his own right, so
Yeah,
Chad's getting every little incremental advantage he can. He
yeah.
really wants this one.
That's Chad is a very good general manager. I mean, we give him all sorts of flack, but the guy you don't create a behemoth like this without being pretty good at paying attention to all the details. And so, but I will say this: Nathan is still in quotes new, right? He's in the new wave of the new wave. So we have constantly new waves of general managers. Um, I guess effectively I should be considering him to be completely transitioned fully fully in, but I still see him as a new wave. But he is a fantastic general manager, also obviously to deal with the Atlantic Division. I didn't realize that Charm City had like a 8-year run or something like that on that, which is why I wrote the one feature. I'm anticipating this one quite a bit because, like you say, I think that Nashville is beatable. They are becoming beatable. I don't think they'll ever be easy to beat, but I think they are beatable. And Nathan's team is really well constructed to make that challenge. So we'll see what happens. I thought it was interesting. The Lucas McNeil thing in particular is interesting because by rule he gets no service days on this since it's in the playoffs. I don't
Yeah.
I don't know if that had anything to do with the decision or not. But McNeil played Double A. He did not play Triple A, and his bat was not good in Double A. But defensively, obviously, he can play the game at this level. So, really interesting move.
We have to hope that he has to take some at bats. Charlotte can tie a game, and it's a huge downgrade. It looks like what Chad's been doing is moving Calderon, his third baseman, out of the lineup, sliding Ramos over to third.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's a huge drop off offensively, so it's a little risky for a minimal gain, but that is an incredible infield defense once he does that. He basically has 3 shortstops in the infield at that point.
Yeah, and that's a piece of why Nashville's pitching is so strong. I mean, obviously their base pitching is strong too, but you put together a base pitching staff that is already super strong with an elite defense on the infield in particular. But Kramer at center is also, and Gonzalez and right. They're all really good
center
defenders.
fielders too, yeah.
And Tingle in left. They're all really good fielders as far as that's concerned. So it's going to be a fun matchup.
I think the X factor is Bob Anderson. That was a great move that Nathan made because I thought the pitching was a little weak and overperforming in Charlotte, and he recognized that clearly because he traded for 2 pitchers, and Anderson has that really high stuff rating where like anything can happen. If he just gets hot, he could win. I don't know if he'll start 2 or 3 games in the series, but I have to imagine if Charlotte wins, he'll be a big part of the reason why.
Yeah, like I say, Nathan made some really gutsy moves going through this whole season, and his season was really up and down. He did not start well, but he hung with it and managed to take that division. So really interesting. I have a question for you about one of the Charlotte mainstay players, as far as that's concerned, and that is almost certainly one of Nathan's favorites, and that is the way I pronounce it anyway is Jacquat Natta, right? The two-way player. And the question that I have for you, he is super young, but even, back when David Ackerman for Charm City was in like 23 or 24, I looked at him and I went, well, as long as he doesn't get hurt, he is on a direct path to the Hall of Fame, despite the fact that he's 22, 23, right? I look at Natta, and I asked myself that question. Is Jacquat Natta on his way to the Hall of Fame? And before I get into my thoughts about that, he's a young player, very productive. He's been injured once or twice. But what are your thoughts if I throw that at you? Do you see Natta's early stage as pushing toward the Hall?
Well, the first thing to clarify there is I'm a big Hall guy, so my answer is going to be different than somebody else, and I think it's a no-brainer because of what he does for the team. Being a two-way player and filling 2 spots, it honestly doesn't have to do with the roster spot as much. I mean, whatever, everybody has a little chaff on the end of the roster, but financially speaking, to only have to compensate a guy, I'm sure he's about to start getting expensive, but even if he makes 10, 12, 14 million, I mean, he pitches like an $8 million pitcher, he hits like a $10 million hitter, and you're going to get that at a discount. Super valuable, but it won't be the normal Hall of Fame resume because I don't think he's quite going to get there as a hitter. Partially because he misses some at bats. Just when he comes out of the game as a pitcher, I don't know if he keeps DHing. Nathan might have to correct me on some of this stuff, but he will get hurt more often because he's susceptible to arm injuries, so he's going to miss more time as a result. So I don't see him hitting like 500 home runs or checking some of the boxes a hitter would. But even just as like an innings eating pitcher, that has like tons of value, and he's starting to flash the ability to be like a second or third starter as well. So injuries a little scary, but if he stays durable enough, it's a no-brainer in my opinion.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think about it in two different directions because that's the kind of person that I am. I can't just stick on one brainwave. Yeah, from a personal standpoint, when I look at him, again, assuming essentially a healthy career and a longish run and not a drop off at 28 or whatever, I combine the two and I think, boy, that's going to look like a really impressive package. But then the second side of me says, our BBA voting block, what will they do? How will they look at this will be a new thing, a true two-way player, um, you know, as a batter if he puts up 40 WAR and as a pitcher if he puts up 30 WAR. Will either of those two look impressive enough against other batters or other pitchers for people to vote for him? Or will the population look at it and say, like you said, it's a no-brainer, you add him up, it's 70 WAR between this and it's a unicorn kind of player, although by then it may not be unicorn because we do have more two-way players coming, right? It's just a different class of creature when we're going to be talking about voting. I personally believe that if I looked at a player that had a 70 or 75 WAR split between two, I would probably vote for him. I'm not going to speak 100% for future run because that's always a little bit dangerous. I might change my mind on things. But what do you think about the voting block in that sense? It will be a new thing for us, and we have some small hall guys, and the small hall guys have been kind of predominant in most of the voting. They can get a block going. I just don't know what I don't know what they're going to do. So that's the root of why I asked the question. I'm just curious.
One of the biggest things working against him is just the way the like online pages are laid out. Like it's a pain in the ass to see both of his sets of stats. I had to open two tabs. If you're on the HTML page, you just don't see the pitching stats unless there's something I'm missing. So hopefully Nathan's still around because there's no bigger cheerleader for Natta than Nathan, and he'll help contextualize some of that stuff for the voters.
Right.
But realistically, yeah, he's going to lose a vote or two just because it's like hard to see the stats on the page.
That's actually an interesting point, and I hadn't thought of that because I personally do like the HTML pages better than I like the Stats Plus pages, simply because it has the color graphic thing. It just catches my eye better, right? Using the Stats Plus pages are actually more depth and more information, but they're more work. So I would tend to almost always go to HTML first. So that is actually interesting. I had not thought about that dynamic.
He's a captain. That's like one of those things that won't. I don't know. I don't know if I've ever seen that brought up in Hall of Fame voting around the league, but it probably we care about it during players' careers, so we probably should care about it when we vote. And then now maybe it'll work to his advantage. He's got so much young talent around him too. Like sometimes that helps in real life, where it's like people will just associate him with Chavez and Bedredden. I don't know.
Yeah.
And those three all could become eligible around the same time. I think Bandit would be better at second base right now, so he might be losing like a little bit of WAR because he's having to play third also. So that's kind of an interesting thing that I'd almost want to give him like a little bit of credit for when I'm voting for him. But I can't think of the case against him other than the injury thing I mentioned, which, like you said, we have to assume health to have this kind of conversation. Right. But we also have to be realistic about the fact, like, Ackerman was fragile very early on, and so that got talked about, and a guy who's pitching, too, is going to get hurt more often, and so that's a real risk also.
Yeah, there you go.
Maybe he'll only do one or the other at some point in his career, too. I would think that would be hitting, but he's still a young guy. Pitchers tend to develop a little later, so maybe he's a better pitcher in 2 years. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, speaking of young pitchers, I've got another name I want to throw out just to talk about because I think it is a scintillating moment. I think if this were in a real life, we'd be having Fernando Mania kind of stuff going on around Harry Brassington in Austin, right? 19-year-old kid, and it struck me because in Chuck Valence's, I think I'm pronouncing Valence's name properly. If not, Chuck can tell me, and I apologize. But he wrote a nifty team news about that, and Rob made some comment about it kind of breaking immersion. And I get the concept that we have an awful lot of very young players coming in, and maybe we can talk about that to a degree too. But Brassington, number one, is a pitcher, and we have got a lot of young hitters coming in, but not that many developed young pitchers, right? And he has just been scintillating in his 6 starts since Austin called him up. Don't know if you have any thoughts about him, and in particular in relation to that split between pitcher and hitter youth, because my feeling is I haven't actually dug into the numbers, which is not like me, but I haven't dug into the numbers. My feeling is that the youth movement is very heavily weighted toward pitchers or towards hitters, and not so much toward pitchers. So this makes Brassington a little bit of a unicornish thing inside a group of unicorns. I don't know. What are your thoughts about Henry Brassington?
I mean, I agree with what it's tilted towards position players for sure. He's already good. He actually does still have a fair amount of development left. So
He does.
I don't want to take anything away from him because he's 19 years old. Mm-hmm. And it was really, I think it was like 5 straight starts of 1 run or less after giving up 7 runs in his debut. So
yeah,
nearly untouchable after that first start. He's got 6 pitches and none of them are fully developed. Mm-hmm. No pitches above a 5 right now. He's more of just he looks like an innings eater right now, but he's 19. Like, a lot's going to change. And he'll have to counteract all these stud young offensive players who he's going to have to face off against, especially in the frontier. It's going to be a tough pitching environment for him. But he is the premier young pitcher at this point. It just, a year or two ago, it was the guy in Brooklyn, who's Torres, who's a reliever now. So things can change so quickly with pitchers. I just wouldn't want to count my eggs before they hatch, kind of thing. But he's a guy who we have to talk about. He's 19, and he's already made such an impact.
Yeah, and that's the thing that struck me, and the reason why I wanted to bring him up is because when I saw, I guess 2 things that struck me. When I saw Chuck's team news about him, I, of course, ended up replying. I went to my Bill James pitcher rank thing, and I looked at him, and I was, it is true that when you pitch, unless you have a horrible outing, you will gain points. Working on another script that will let me put together career paths by that, and you'll see that pretty much unless you just bomb, you're going to gain a few points in the rankings up until you get to a equilibrium point, right? And the best pitchers will have a higher equilibrium point than the not best pitchers and so forth. But what struck me is that his 5 or 6 outings here were kind of off the charts. I mean, gaining more than 10 and 12 and 15 points at a single outing is a really good outing. So that's what made me go back and look at him. And I agree. I think it's interesting that he's having that kind of outing with his development not complete. If he continues to develop and fills out, I mean, we may be seeing a generational kind of a pitcher. Torres in Brooklyn is an interesting comparison, but Torres's stamina has always been questionable as to whether he should start or not. I mean, I can't argue against Ben starting him in Brooklyn, but I'm not sure that I would do that. That doesn't mean that I'm right. Depends on his team structure and what he's trying to accomplish. But Torres is probably never going to be a 6 and 7 inning pitcher whereas Bransington, I think, is a full-blown starter. Um, I'm extremely excited to see what happens with Brassington as he goes forward, and knock on my wood here that he stays healthy because he could be really. I love seeing really solid star players in the league, and plus Austin can really use a star player. That would make a big difference for Chuck and the Austin Shredders.
Chuck owes it to him to put some better infield defense behind him. I
There
was
you
pulling
go.
up your defensive metrics, and he's got the fourth worst ground ball defense, and Brassington looks like he's going to be a ground ball pitcher.
Yeah.
Which he's 19 years old. Chuck's got time to do that, but that would be probably priorities 1, 2, and 3 for Chuck this offseason is
Yeah, there you
filling
go.
out his defense and maybe add another pitcher.
Well, I will say on that aspect that sometimes that is easier said than done. As
That's
a
a good
bikini,
point.
I've been working to attempt to get my defense better, um, and it's a little bit. I've been a little bit nonplussed sometimes with defensive metrics in version 25 in particular, because I'll get guys that I think look like they should be at least kind of average, and still can't seem to get out of the doldrums. So, but I am certain that Chuck has plans as far as that goes. I've liked seeing what he's been pushing on.
He's
But
got like he's got like 4 corner outfielders who can OPS 900 or better. It looks like so. I think his intention is to try to swap one of those guys out. Luckily, he's got like the best of the best
there you
depth
go.
in that spot. So that's probably the answer.
So those are some of the things that are on my mind. Well, I was going to say the other thing that comes to mind when Rob's response, which was perfect, like perfectly fine. I kind of lose immersion about these 19-year-olds, and my pithy response was, yeah, I hate it when the league goes all Bob Feller and Dwight Gooden and what Felix Hernandez on us, because I mean, 19-year-olds come in and pitch in real life, so there is that. The fundamental issue that I think Rob is getting into is that there's so many young players coming in, right? But when Ted and I used to talk a whole bunch, we were getting into this idea that sometimes you see these weird flows, and you just have to. I call it a comic book world, right? Where it's like one of those old Archie comics or whatever. It's a real thing, but it's kind of blown out of proportion at times, and sometimes things don't go the way that they exactly would because Out of the Park is a weird thing. So when we get one of these, I think last time we talked, I was saying that the youth at the top of the war list kind of makes my aesthetic viewpoint go ugh. But at the same time, I mean, this is a comic book world. It used to go ugh when we had the high end guys, the old guys. Now it's going a little bit more ugh when it's young. I feel better when it's young than when it's super old but still, it is what it is. Um, my my secondary response to my first my first response was the thing that I threw. My second response was, oh, that's a comic book thing, and my third response was to remember Vic and Vic Kaleka and just say, hey, the goal here is to have fun, right? And a guy like Brassington and Natta and some of these young guys, they are definitely fun, and they create a different environment from which to judge value and things like that. And I always enjoy when the environment is changing. Um, so I guess I'm chastising myself for all of my multiple responses when it comes to these kinds of things. So
I think you were right though, and it's easy to take Rob out of context. I'm sure he'd agree. Like the bigger issue
right,
is like just seeing it all over the place.
right.
Brassington made 5 really good starts. He's gonna do it for a whole season too before it's really an issue, so to speak. And then the fact that he's a pitcher when almost all of the other players are hitters, and the fact he plays for Austin rather than some other guy coming up with Nashville or something, is going to make him a lot easier to root for, I think.
There you go. So I'm interested. I guess we've been talking about the young players, Obviously we've got some things going on right now as the rest of the league, not Charlotte and Nashville, although I would assume that they're both actually still looking out to next year, although Chad is probably looking at how he's going to get some sleep here in the near term future with his little one. But I know I have been spending quite a bit of time, quite a bit of my non-silly post-exhibition season tournament time, looking out into the future, looking out into what 2063 is going to be, and of course the version 26 change and things like that. But in particular, looking at who's going to look at arbitration, who's going to be getting arbitration, who I'm going to be dropping. Right this moment, I'm on the path of Mike McClure is going to be dropped. Next hour, I'll change my opinion, and I was actually a little bit most. I was mostly perturbed when Matt pushed back the sim from last night because I had convinced myself 100% that McClure was going to be gone, and that was going to happen. And now it delayed it another day, and so it's anyway. I am interested. What are your thoughts as you look forward for San Fernando and your viewpoints on 40-man roster slots, projecting out into Rule 5s, free agency? This is one of my favorite times of year when it comes right down to it. After I've been eliminated from the SPET, and I get to be thinking about where the future is. I just wish it wouldn't have been such a long time.
Yeah, I got a lot of reps in at this for sure. The most anxious I get when playing this game is putting guys on waivers and seeing if they get claimed, and then like the ultimate waiver scenario, which is the Rule 5 draft. The Rule 5 draft feels like putting your whole organization on waivers for a sim, and everyone combs through all of your players, and I love looking at all the guys in the minor leagues and dreaming on what they could be despite all their warts. So the most important thing that I do before each off season is I look at my 40-man roster and I figure out what my 40-man needs to look like a couple months later for the Rule 5 draft. So figure out some years you have one or two players who you feel like you need to protect from the draft, and some years I've needed to put like 8 or 9 guys on my 40-man roster. So needing to have an idea of what that number is going to look like and then clearing enough spots to be able to add them. So like right now, it's also funny because you can't really publicly talk about it. Like I like posting team news posts about almost every other subject, but I can't talk about who I'm considering to add to the 40-man because somebody will read it and then draft them in the draft. So you can't talk about it until after, but I've got like 5 guys right now, I think, in my system I need to protect next year, and I have 37 players now, I think, on my 40-man. Mm-hmm. 5 guys will become free agents. So you have to start. People were joking about the math on Discord yesterday. This is a little bit more straightforward math, but it's some math. I'll clear 5 spots. I'll go from 37 to 32. Then I can add 5 players to go back up to 37, and that means I could draft 3 players in the Rule 5 draft. And with the amount of talent that has been in the Rule 5 draft recently, I think you'd be kind of crazy not to have like a spot or 2 just to take a flyer, like put a list together. If they don't fall to you or they get protected, so be it, but you don't have a chance at a player if you don't have an open spot. And then, I think a lot of teams do this, but then you decide if you keep them based on whether you sign a free agent or end up making a trade. Right. Maybe you have to give somebody back, and there's no risk there. So that's one component of it. I have a second part to it, but let me pause there. Like, is that the same way you approach it, Ron, when you think about your 40-man?
Yes and no. When I was running Yellow Springs, I pretty much never paid any attention to the Rule 5 at all. Everything I was doing was inside my organization. I think maybe twice in that time period, my system failed me, and I needed to find a placeholder that I could hold on to until things rolled up. Now, that having been said, the talent pool was quite different at that stage. When I first took over Bikini, I went heavily into Rule 5 because I needed, number one, so much, but also I decided, like my very first year, I don't know if you recall, I think I Rule 5 like 5 catchers. because I had nobody was any good, and the only Rule 5 catchers out there, I went defense first for all 5 of them, and basically said I'm going to see if any of them will be unprotected. And it turned out all of them were unprotected, so I got all 5 of them, and I ran through them together inside the. So I was definitely focused on Rule 5 to fill a spot of absolute need at the major league roster. But even then, the talent pool, it was still the older players were out there, and the talent pool was not that strong. I think, as we talked last time, Alan and I chatted on the board a couple of times. Alan has been projecting this young surge for some time. The dynamics of Rule 5, I think, are really changing. And so given the I think we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the young talent that is going to be beginning to get out there. So yes, I am actually, at this moment, I have spent quite a bit of, way too much time, looking at my 40-man roster, paring it down. I think I got it actually down to, it's sitting at 33 right this minute.
You're the lowest in the league. That surprised me to see that.
Yeah.
Have you been waiving guys, or how did, or was it higher a month ago?
I've got 3 guys on the waiver list right now. I might have released somebody. So yeah, I'm down to 33, and my thought pattern is similar to yours in that I'm going to take a really strong look at what's out there. My real point of view right now is my payroll is projected. I'm projecting my payroll to be about $82 million. If I want to stretch it a little bit, I might go to 85, but probably 80 to 82. I'm going to be at about 69 or 70 going into free agency, so that gives me 10 to 13 million dollars. I want to try to, if I can, I'm going to try to find one player that will be an impact player in one of the 3 or 4 places that I would like to replace. And if not, then like you just kind of said, I should be able to find somebody in Rule 5 that might help me out in those other places too. So my attempt to pare down my 40-man is both financial and, to be honest, I've got a whole bunch of young players that are going to be coming up that I'm going to need to put on the 40-man, and that's going to be that's why I say we're at the tip of the iceberg. I think we are just getting to the point this year and really more next year when all of the big draft classes for the past 4 years or so are going to start needing to be put on the 40-man roster. At which point you're going to have to see a lot of people on waivers, and ideally it will be a very good time. I think, knock on my wood again, to be a up and coming team, because you should be able to find valuable players pretty routinely, even if you're in the upper tier, I think, because even the behemoths have things they would like to back up and add depth and things like that. So
there's 2 spots that I especially am focusing on in the Rule 5 draft, which is outfielders, which is because teams just can't protect all these outfielders that they have, and I've been intentionally not drafting outfielders, assuming I can just take the leftovers of what people can't protect. And then middle infield, if you go look at the upcoming free agents and you filter on like 8 infield range, I want to say there was like 1 player or something. Like there aren't free agents in the middle infield, so I've just been trying to draft one every year because people don't protect guys in A-ball and AA with 9 infield range who maybe aren't very good hitters, but like if you're a team who just doesn't have anybody who can even defend, like I think it's a common refrain. I basically alluded to it earlier with Austin, but I think it gets thrown out there with like Brooklyn a lot, or teams that have had bad defense for a few years in a row. Like, there's no way to add a 9 infield range shortstop in May. Like, it's kind of too late at that point. So throw one on your bench. You don't even have to play them that much. They can be a defensive sub, but that's just a way to add one to your org, and then after you keep them on your roster for a year, they can go back to the minors next year. If you just do it every year, you slowly build up a bit of a pipeline of middle infielders.
Yeah. Yeah, and when I hear you say that, I think about it in my own brain systemically, right? I want to it's a numbers game before it's all said and done. And like when I was saying, beginning with Bikini and all the catchers, I kept two of them for my major leagues, and I think I made deals with two of the other teams so that I could put two more defense first catchers down in my AA and AAA levels, so as to catch the pitchers there and to be ready in case of a injury or whatever. So you add depth in that sense. Gosh, I can't remember who it was. I read through all of the team news's. I caught up.
Too many.
Too many to remember. Somebody had did a draft and stash on a pitcher this year that I thought was quite
Louisville.
spiffy. Was it Louisville? Okay.
The reliever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Got high potential ratings now. Yeah.
Right. I mean, he definitely. I mean, he was plastered.
Like a 10 ERA.
Yeah. It was not pretty for him to pitch. But now he has him in his organization, and Louisville was in a position where you can argue that Louisville was capable of going to the playoffs, but boy, that was they had no pitching at all, so that was a 50-50 kind of thing. Louisville's going to be a team to watch next year. I think this offseason should be really interesting to watch what Brian does in Louisville. Actually, I'm very interested in both Louisville and Chicago in the Heartland, and to a slightly lesser extent, Yellow Springs. Rob should have quite a bit of money to mess around with before it's done.
Louisville and Yellow Springs can dip into that $40 million of bonus funds they have and start throwing some money at some free agents.
Yeah, there you go.
The pitcher you're thinking of is Juan Alonso.
There you go.
He's got 11.76 potential, but he's only a 5.55 current ratings, and he had negative 1.8 WAR.
Right.
And they're bullpen.
So there's an example. There's a team that is in essentially a perfect situation to pick up a, in quotes, free prospect. That all you have to do is pay for their horrible performance for 1 year and just try to stash them and not try to protect them, keep them out of.
8th or 9th reliever is pretty
right.
If you have any chance of the playoffs, you really can't afford to do that because it will sink you. But if you're unlikely to lose, less than 90 games, I think it's a good strategy. It's one that I employed right after I joined the league. I stashed a few guys.
There you go. All right, you said you had a second thought.
Yeah, and this one gets real technical. I think I probably have a reputation now for loving like the little intricacies of the way the contracts work and everything. But I have a guy. His name is Cody Glenn, I think, who's in AAA for me. And I looked at giving him a September call-up, but he's one of those guys who already has enough major league service where he would have become a free agent if I had added him to my roster. But he'd already signed a minor league extension, so I actually was incentivized to not call him up, go through the offseason with him not on my 40-man so that he would stay in my org. And then before the Rule 5 draft, I'll need to add him because I think somebody would draft him personally.
Yeah.
And then when I add him to my major league roster, at that point, he'll play for league minimum for a year. So that is a very specific, like little 40-man wrinkle is don't add him before the off season because he'd become major league free agent eligible.
Right.
But like a best practice, I think, for every team, it's probably known by everybody, but is to go to your upcoming free agents and just offer minor league extensions to everyone. And by the end of the year, you should be down to like a manageable number of people who are either major league free agents or usually I have a handful of guys who are minor leaguers who are going to be free agent eligible in the minor leagues. And the other decision you have to make with some of those guys is if they have less than 6 years of major league service time, you just add them to the 40-man so they're bound to your organization for the next year. And that might mean you have to pay arbitration, or if they're on a minor league, major league option type contract, you might have to pay them $1 million or something. But
Right.
that's a way to retain players as well. So that's part of the decision making going into the off season is, are there guys I can keep around by manipulating this? And then are there guys who I want to clear out because if I waive them after they've already renewed, then you have to pay them out the league minimum. And so you don't want to do that with too many players. Sometimes I do just keep a guy
Right.
on my 40-man, go to the off season, and then waive him. But I have to pay him $500,000 then.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be the right decision, just to keep 42 or 43 40-man type talents in your org. It really just depends on the position and just sort of where you're at. But have you had similar situations to that?
Um, yeah, I think the important message out of the whole conversation is to be, paying attention to the basic concept of service time and 40-man service time and so forth. I think my frame of reference, I use the term manipulation of the timing of moving players onto and off of onto the 40 man and onto the active roster and things like that. When I think of manipulation, I think of service time manipulation, and I tend to focus more on the obvious, real the situations where you've got a star player and you're trying to hold on to that extra year of control so that you get the 7 years rather than 6 right before it's all said and done. And that gets you into the you're halfway through the year and you decide you're going to pull your guy down for 2 weeks to try to save their service time. So you fill a 40 man, you've got him on the 40 man, but you pull him down and put him in the minors and use up an option to save the 2 or 3 weeks of time that you need to save that makes me uncomfortable. I have done that a time or two in my life, but I don't have as much. It's odd for me because I don't have as much discomfort with the idea of, I saved 2 weeks of Paul Warboy's time at the beginning of this year because our calendar allowed for 4-man rotations, and so I left Warboys in the minors, and that felt real to me, right? Warboys could pitch in the minors. I had my 4-man rotation because Pico was with the team at the time. So there's no, why would you put a guy up on the roster when you only need 4 starters? That doesn't feel bad to me. What feels bad to me is when you're sitting there in July and deciding, well, I just need to save X number of weeks of somebody's time, so I'm going to make this swap right now. I know I did that once with Michael Buckley, but he was hitting 181 at the time or something like that, and it was like, I got to get him off my roster. So I'll kill 2 birds with 1 stone, and I'll save a little bit of service time, right? This question of, in quotes, manipulating at the tail end of the season doesn't feel like the same thing. I think Major League general managers are constantly looking at when do I add somebody on the 40 man to be advantageous and when not to, and things like that. So, it is not against the rule, not at least formally against any rules to do any service time manipulation. It's all up to individuals. It's just my reaction when you use the term manipulation on that example was that's not really manipulation. The rules are set up to do these things, right? But then what is the ethical line between the rules are set up to do these things and true manipulation? The difference probably is that the real life player union would sue you for doing the one and maybe not for the other. I don't know.
Yeah, if I hadn't said anything, nobody would have been any the wiser, and this guy will probably, blow up next April to 20 ERA, and it won't matter. But you're right. I'm taking advantage of the fact he signed a minor league extension is what I think I'm doing, but he doesn't have any claim to being some bona fide big leaguer. He's gotten a little BBA time and he's never had an ERA under 5. So I'm going to use him a little differently as a reliever. Hopefully it goes a little better, but yeah.
Right. So, but yeah, I think fundamentally, just as a for me, it's more a matter of this the idea of going in and signing all your guys to minor league extensions earlier in the year, right? I do that just mostly so that I remember to do it. 'Cause
They're often more likely to do it if they haven't been crushing AAA for 4 months. So doing it like right away is smart, I think.
Because I had one year where I kind of just forgot to do it, and then that's bad. So that's for me, it's more of an administrative thing than anything else, because my brain will not focus sometimes on those kinds of things. But alrighty, anything else you want to chat about around the league here today, or?
No, I think we'll probably get into the dev lab soon enough, but I haven't spent any time looking at it in 26, so everybody's going to get the new version of the game, and hopefully things go smoothly for Matt transferring the file over to the new game, and hopefully we can start simming sooner rather than later within the new program.
I jotted this down inside the GBC area. That was one of the questions for the dev lab, is for GBC folks whose season is already off season is already progressing, and they've got players in the dev lab. So I'll just say it here in case they're listening or whatever, but maybe it's too late. I don't know. As far as I can tell, if they have already put their players inside the dev lab, the import from 25 to 26 will go along just fine, with the exception of if they put them in to learn a new position. If they put them in to learn a new position, that apparently doesn't work properly. I don't think that reward or that option is technically in 26. So if that happens, the player that you put in upon import will be removed from the dev lab, and another player will be put in at random doing some. What I saw, if I said learn a new position, what I found is that they were trying to learn improve infield defense or something like that. I don't know if that's repeatable. If that's just one case that I saw, right? But I'm going to be excited to see what the dev lab does. It's another thing that I've spent way too much time. I mean, I've got if I could just have 40 dev lab spots, I could almost do what I want to do, maybe. But then, of course, I'd find another 20 more that I'd like to do instead. So, maybe next time we can have a deeper conversation about what we're thinking about the dev lab, because that actually, I've been surprised by how intrigued I am by the development lab. I didn't think that was going to be a feature that I thought was particularly attractive. It was just one of those, okay, well, that's interesting. But it has taken up way more of my thought process than I ever expected that it would, and I find it to be quite fun to think about. So,
just another knob in the random number generator that is OOTP, and we love our knobs. And
there you go.
Comparing how we turn them to one another.
Yep, that's what I keep telling the developers is give us more stuff. Give us more visibility. Give us more. Show us all of the personality traits. Don't just show us 6. Show us all 12 or however many of them there are. I don't know, because the more things you got to think about, the more interesting it is. But that's my view anyway.
Yeah, more time spent looking at and playing their product. Seems right. You seem aligned, you would think.
Yeah. Alrighty. Well, thank you for your time here today. We will call this a episode, and I'm gonna go and try to. I've been keeping my eye out to see if we get the sim going here while we were chatting, but unfortunately, I'm very interested to see what happens. Good luck to both Chad and Nathan. One more call out. Remember that all of the award voting is open, so please get your votes in, both for BBA and GBC. I don't know if you saw my note. I forgot that I had forgotten to do the GBC, so I had to go back and do that again. But support everybody and have fun looking at all the players. Maybe we can talk about reward or award results next time too. That should be fun.
Yeah, happy Easter to those of us in the real world, and if you're trapped inside of the Brewster, happy Halloween. Say it's almost Halloween.
There you go. Alrighty, Kurt. Well, we'll chat again next time.
Sounds good.